Let's talk about information. In fact, let's pretend we don't know anything about information and see what it would be like to discover what information is and what that would mean, what we could do with that. Well, where will we start? Well, anywhere we started, we'd be starting with nothing. And that's an important part of information we'll see that is useful throughout, no matter what we're doing. Nothing at all. A state of voidness. Null. Nothing. This is the basis of information. Then let's say something came along. We found an item, an object, some weird thing. To keep it simple, let's say we find a block. This block is something. I can see it, I can hold it, I can tell it's here. If I couldn't see it, if I couldn't hold it, and if I couldn't tell it was here, well, then I would have nothing again. So if I can't see, hold, touch, somehow measure, somehow notice this object, then I have nothing still. But when I can see it, touch it, notice it, know it's there, then I know I have an object, and I know that this is different than nothing at all. Obviously, it's right here, as you can see. That leads me to first assume that information is the idea that I can tell something is different. I can notice a difference. So information, our first working guess at it, is information is a noticeable difference. Well, there's a lot of ways I could tell that this is different than nothing. Is there? I can't really name anything. It's nothing to compare it to. But what if I compared it to this? Now I have two objects that are, well, they're the same. They look the same to me. I can touch them the same way. They feel the same weight. They slide the same. Moreover, I can't even truly tell which one I started with. These are the same thing. So now, sameness is something that has to do with information. Well, sameness just means that I can't tell a difference. So sameness is no noticeable differences. Let's write that down. Now, remember, we are discovering, or pretending like we're discovering what information is. We're starting with nothing, and then we ended up with something. We're going to have to write working definitions to know what information is. We can change these at any time. These aren't necessarily right. They aren't necessarily totally wrong. All that matters is that there's something that we can work with. Just like we can work with these, we can now work with these as well. We can work with what something means to be different and what it means to be the same. Also notice that these two things, these two blocks, are different from nothing. We established that. But they're different than nothing in a different way than one of them is different than nothing. But when we're talking about the sameness, we were comparing these two blocks to each other. So when we're discussing information, a big part of it is going to be what we're comparing things to. This is starting to get complicated somewhat fast, and that's to be expected. We're opening up from a starting point a lot of different branches, and we're not going to be able to traverse every single branch at first. So we're going to have to accept we're working with some wrong definitions, some assumptions, some misguided steps, but trust ourselves to fix those later with information that we find on the way. What we do want is for our ideas to be consistent. The whole point of discovering what information is to be able to use it, which means I want it to be useful. It won't be useful to me if the ideas that I'm exploring with these blocks, say nothing and then something, and that being a difference, if that can't apply to anywhere else, it's not useful to me. I can't use it, and then there's no point of knowing what information is. So we are going to believe that the ideas I'm talking about with this block and nothingness can apply in other areas, that the ideas we have around information can apply elsewhere. And we'll test that. We'll see. It might be true and it might not, but we'll give it a shot. It's better to start with this than to start with, well, nothing at all. Now, this block we established is the same as this block, but what about this one? Well, when we have nothing, this is different than nothing, but is it different than this? Well, yeah, it is. How can we tell? Well, for me, it's color. These have different colors. So they're different than each other because of their color, the way they look. But nothing doesn't have a color. So when I say that this is different than nothing, and I say that this is different than this, the differences between the two aren't the same differences. That's kind of weird. It's a difference of differences. Well, this one's different than this one in the same way that it's different than this one. So now there can also be a sameness of differences. We're going to ponder about that for a while. Let me introduce another block. Here's another one. This is different than nothing, but it's different than this. And this is different than this. Here's another block. And yet another one. This is different than this, and it's different from this, and these are different than there. This one's different from these two. These two are the same. Strange. These are all different from one another. They're all different than nothing. But is this block different from this block in the same way that this is different from this block? And what about the relationship between these two? Well, the only way I can say that these two are different is by the way they look. The shape is the same. The weight is the same. It's just the look, the color. And same goes for these. It's just the color. And the color, the color. It's just the color that makes these things different. So all of these have information about their color. Now what about this pen? This pen is different than nothing. I can see it. I can measure it. I'm noticing it. And it's different than this block. But the way that these two are different is very different than the way these two are different. The color is different. So I could consider it different just based off its color. However, the weight is different. The shape is different. This is more complex. It comes apart and can write, while these are just little blocks. So now there's more ways to compare them. There's more things that I can notice. But back when we were just talking about the blocks, there's only one thing that I can notice. So it seems that differences in information don't apply to just that you can notice something, but it has to do with what you notice. The difference between these blocks is color, or for that matter, the sameness has to do with color. Color is a set of possible things that it could be. I know the colors. I know red, I know yellow, I know blue and purple and orange. I've learned these because, well, the colors have stayed the same for me. So the only reason I can say this is red is, well, it's the same in terms of color as every other red thing that I've ever seen. The same goes for the other colors. Now there's only so many colors. There's red, orange, and yellow. There's green, blue, and purple. And anything that has a color, limiting it to these 6, would fall into one of these groups if I were to compare them. For example, our difference note, well, it's not exactly the same as green, but I know that it's the same as green. These are both green. But this pen, the way to compare it falls outside of the color. So we need to, instead of just having information, we need to have sets that the information belongs to. Now, we've sort of defined information. We know that it's a noticeable difference, and that difference belongs to a set. Well, at least we know that there are differences that can belong to a set. We'll have to explore more on that later. And we know that some things are the same. I don't know if we quite answered what information is, but I know we're discovering something interesting about it. And we'll have to keep on exploring to know more.